"Where's your family?" the nurse asked, quietly handing me a tissue as I sat in the cold hospital hallway. I didn't have an answer. The funeral was small, quiet, just me, the chaplain, and the little white box holding my daughter's ashes. Her name was Ava Grace. She was born at 32 weeks and didn't make it through the night. I sent the group text, told my parents the time, the date, the chapel location. I even offered to arrange transportation. Mum replied 10 minutes later. "Kyle already sent out invites for his pool party that weekend. You know how much effort he put into it. Don't ruin this for him." My fingers froze around the phone. They weren't coming. Not to the funeral of their only grandchild. Because Kyle, my younger brother, had an Instagram-sponsored backyard pool party with a DJ and frozen margaritas. I stood alone that Saturday morning as the wind carried the priest's words across an empty lawn. I watched the flowers tremble on the casket. And I realized something. I wasn't just grieving a child. I was grieving a family that had decided I wasn't worth showing up for. For the next few weeks, they acted like nothing had happened. My mom invited me to brunch. My dad forwarded a TED Talk titled "Overcoming Weakness with Positive Thinking." Kyle sent me a selfie with 2 influencers and a caption, "Best birthday ever." They saw me as fragile, dramatic, weak, because I was a woman who lost her child and cried about it. At first, I told myself it wasn't intentional. They didn't know how to deal with grief. Maybe they were trying to stay strong. But deep down, I knew better. They didn't respect me, not as a daughter, not as a mother, not as a woman. In their eyes, I wasn't building a career. I was just still working retail. Never mind that I was managing the flagship store of a luxury brand they bragged about to their golf buddies. To them, I was always just Naomi, the sensitive one, the single one, the one who never quite lived up to the Walker name. I didn't scream. I didn't demand anything. But I made a decision that day at Ava's funeral. If I wasn't worth showing up for, I'd make sure one day they couldn't look away. They had no idea that this wasn't the end of a tragedy. It was the beginning of a revenge story. A month after the funeral, I walked into Sunday dinner like I hadn't buried my child alone. No one brought it up, not even a pause in conversation. My mom asked if I wanted a mimosa. My dad talked about golf. Kyle showed off a video of his new pool setup going viral. 2.3 million views. "You should smile more, Naomi," my mum said, topping off my drink. "You look like someone died." I just stared at her. Did she forget? Or did she just not care enough to remember? Kyle interrupted with a laugh. "Anyway, I think I just locked in a brand deal with Aquajet. They want me to design a pool float collection, like signature colors and everything." Mum beamed like he'd won a Nobel. "I always said you had that marketing mind. Unlike some people who, well, prefer to stay small." I knew what that meant. Small was what they called my job. Managing Argente's flagship store, the one on Fifth Avenue, the one influencers filmed at, the one that pulled in 18 last quarter. But to them, I was just Naomi who works retail, the one who never finished her MBA, the one who still rents, the one who got pregnant without a husband. Dad leaned back and said it again, the line he never missed a dinner without. "Still working at the store, Naomi? What's next? Maybe a promotion to folding clothes?" You ever sit at a table and feel like no one sees you, just the version of you they decided you'd be years ago? I sat there and realized I could have brought in $100 in sales and they'd still call me the shop girl. And that's the moment something shifted. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I smiled. "Actually, Dad," I said, "I think I'm learning a lot about operations and market response." He laughed. Kyle rolled his eyes. Mum changed the subject. "And I have to ask, if you've ever been in a room full of people who claim to love you but make you feel smaller every time you speak, what would you have said at that table? Tell me below, because I still replay that moment in my head. That night, I lay in bed, replaying every look, every smirk, every comment. And I made myself a quiet promise. They want to keep calling me a shop girl? Fine. Let's see how they react when the shop girl buys the company. Next chapter. I stop surviving, and I start building. After that dinner, I stopped trying to explain myself. They didn't want to understand. They wanted me to stay small. And honestly, I was tired of fighting for respect I should have already earned. So I got quiet, not defeated, focused. While they laughed at my job title, I was studying the company I worked for, Argenté. Every return, every inventory delay, every shift in customer behaviour, they thought I was folding shirts. I was analysing systems. After closing one night, I sat at the back office desk and opened an anonymous blog, Luxury from the Floor, a space where I wrote breakdowns on what luxury brands were doing wrong and how the next wave of consumers was already outgrowing them. It started slow, a few hundred reads. Then an article called The Death of Polished Branding blew up, reposted by a fashion tech CEO on LinkedIn. By month 3, I had over 40,000 followers. By month 6, that CEO reached out. If you ever want to turn this analysis into real equity, we should talk. I didn't tell anyone, not my co-workers, not my assistant manager, and definitely not my parents. They'd just turn it into another joke. That Christmas, we were sitting around the tree when Kyle got a round of applause for hitting 1 million followers. My mum said, "You know, Naomi, Kyle's really building something. Maybe you could ask him for advice." I just smiled and nodded like I hadn't signed my first silent equity deal 3 days earlier. At work, I started shifting my schedule. Less time behind the counter, more time inside strategy meetings, unofficially. I volunteered to assist corporate visits, helped restructure customer feedback systems. The directors thought I was just eager. No one suspected I was watching for patterns, for weaknesses. Then one Friday night, I was on a Zoom call with 2 private investors from Berlin, both under 35, both fascinated by my blog. They asked, "If we help you build a shell company and you run the analysis, would you be interested in buying in when the market dips?" I didn't blink. Yes. That was the night everything changed. The woman they saw as too emotional, too soft, too retail, was now preparing to quietly acquire controlling interest in the company they bragged about at dinner. And I kept showing up to family brunches in my quiet blazers, letting them say what they wanted, letting them believe I was still just the shop girl. On the outside, nothing had changed. I still clocked in at 8:45 every morning, still wore my neutral blazers, still smiled at every VIP client who walked through the doors of Argenté's flagship. But behind the scenes, I was buying them, piece by piece. The shell company was up and running. My partners, 2 founders from Berlin and 1 from San Francisco, moved fast. Every time the market dipped, we scooped up shares. Discreetly, strategically, legally, my blog kept growing. Now it wasn't just read, it was quoted in Business Insider, Retail Dive, even Forbes. Still, no one at work had a clue. And my parents, they still thought I was behind in life. One Sunday, my mum pulled me aside. "Naomi, I'm saying this with love. You've been floundering. Kyle is thriving. Maybe you could intern for him? At least until you figure things out." Intern. For my brother, the one who cancelled on my daughter's funeral to hand out branded pool floats to influencers. I didn't even blink. "Thanks, Mom. I'll think about it." That week, the executive board of Argenté met behind closed doors to address market stagnation. I wasn't invited, obviously, but I was there, quietly seated at the back as operations support. They didn't notice I was taking notes, not for them, but for me. I watched how they lied about revenue through inflated real estate holdings. I saw which product lines they pushed purely for vanity metrics. I noticed how they spoke to each other, and especially how they spoke down to women. The CEO called one female director overly emotional because she challenged the brand's outdated social strategy. I remembered that because in less than 6 months, I wouldn't just be sitting in the room, I'd be at the head of the table, and nobody, not my parents, not Kyle, not even the board, would see it coming. I still had brunch with the family, still let them make their little digs, still let them laugh when I said I was just working on something on the side. They thought I was harmless. They thought I was background noise. They thought I was still that girl folding sweaters behind the register. And I let them think that. Because some storms don't start with thunder. They begin in silence. And mine was already rolling in. The press conference was held at the Madison, the kind of ballroom lined with velvet chairs, gold trim, and soft classical music that made you feel expensive just by breathing. It was a big day for Argenté. The board had planned to announce a mysterious new leadership transition and tease a rebranding initiative. No one knew the identity of the new CEO, not even my parents. But they came, of course. My mum dressed like she was meeting royalty. My dad brought business cards. Kyle tagged along, likely hoping to network with brand sponsors. They were seated in the VIP section, front row, perfect view. The lights dimmed, cameras clicked, a hush swept over the room. Then my name was announced. Please welcome the new CEO of Argenté, Naomi Walker. It was so quiet I could hear the sound of Kyle's gum freezing in his mouth. I stepped onto the stage in a dark emerald suit designed by our own artisan partners, part of the new Reclaim Grace line I'd curated from scratch. Simple, sharp, nothing like the girl they remembered. Behind me, a screen lit up with the title, From Shop Girl to CEO, The Silent Takeover of Argenté. My parents looked like they'd just seen a ghost, and I wasn't done yet. I walked up to the mic and looked straight into the crowd. Exactly 1 year ago today, I stood alone at my daughter's funeral. My family didn't attend. They were busy. Gasps, a pause. I let it settle. Let it burn. Today, on the anniversary of her passing, I want to honour her the best way I know how, by reclaiming the power everyone said I'd never have. I watched my mother shrink in her seat. My father stopped breathing for a second. Kyle looked like he wanted to disappear. They had skipped my baby's funeral. Now they had front row seats to my rise. Fair trade, if you ask me. After the speech, journalists swarmed. Flashes popped. I gave one quote. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest strategic advantage a woman can have. By that evening, my phone was buzzing non-stop. A text from Mum. Naomi, what did you do? A voicemail from Dad. We need to talk. This is getting out of hand. A single DM from Kyle. Are you seriously the CEO? Like the CEO? I didn't answer. Instead, I looked out the window of my corner office, watching the city lights flicker like tiny trophies. They never saw me coming. But now, they couldn't look away. 3 months later, my face was on the cover of Vogue Business under the headline, The Woman Who Rewrote Luxury, From Sales Floor to CEO. I didn't hang it in my office. I didn't need to. My success wasn't for decoration. It was the quiet kind, the kind that walks into a boardroom and makes the men with $10,000 watches stop talking. That morning, I was reviewing projections for our sustainability rollout when my assistant Claire stepped in. Your father and Charles Winchester are in the lobby, she said carefully. They say it's urgent. I smiled. Of course it was. I let them wait 15 minutes. Then had them brought up to the executive floor, glass walls, floor-to-ceiling views, the kind of room my parents never thought I'd belong in. Charles, one of the oldest board members, looked uneasy. Dad looked older than I remembered. He cleared his throat. Naomi, we came to talk investment. The Morrison Winchester Fund is expanding. We believe in what you're building. I nodded slowly, then turned one of the screens toward them, displaying our quarterly revenue. I appreciate that, but I think we're looking for partners who believed in us before the press did. Dad opened his mouth to respond, but I kept going. Do you remember what you said when I told you I was managing the flagship store? I didn't wait for an answer. You said folding sweaters wasn't a career. You said grief wasn't an excuse for being unproductive. Charles shifted uncomfortably. Now you're asking to buy into a vision you never thought I was capable of, and I'm here to tell you we're good. We don't need old money. The silence that followed was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. Later that week, Mum showed up at our press launch, uninvited, wearing a dress from our new collection. I met her at the entrance. She looked nervous, even careful. You've made us proud, she said softly. I gave a small smile. No, Mum. I made myself proud. That's what got me here. I walked past her, into the room full of cameras, reporters, and voices ready to listen. Because now, finally, I had something worth saying. That night, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, holding a glass of wine and looking over the city that once ignored me as much as my family did. My daughter's photo sat beside me. Ava Grace, her little smile frozen in time. I whispered, "We did it, baby. They see me now." And now I want to ask you, have you ever had someone underestimate you so deeply that you started questioning your own worth? If you've ever been the shop girl in someone's story, the quiet one, the overlooked one, tell me in the comments. Because trust me, you're not alone. And sometimes the best revenge is proving them wrong by proving yourself right.